It's November 30th, 1991. While most of America is thinking about Christmas shopping and the Gulf War, a federal judge in Manhattan is about to kill the most important educational movement in modern Black American history. Judge Kevin Thomas Duffy doesn't know it. He thinks he's just ruling on a copyright case, Grand Upright Music versus Warner Brothers. He's never heard of the Stop the Violence movement. He doesn't know that hip-hop has been teaching black kids about Malcolm X, Marcus Garvey, and the 5% Nation. He doesn't understand that the samples he's about to make illegal are the sonic DNA of black consciousness. With his gavel, Judge Duffy doesn't just change music law, he changes the trajectory of American culture. But our story doesn't start in that courtroom. It starts 3 years earlier, in two very different places, with two very different visions of what hip-hop could become. Picture this. A 23-year-old black man from the South Bronx walks into Harvard University's prestigious lecture hall. He's wearing baggy jeans, Timberland boots, and a leather Africa medallion. The Ivy League students stare as he approaches the podium. His name is Lawrence Parker, but the world knows him as KRS-One. Knowledge reigns supreme over nearly everyone. And he's about to do something unprecedented, deliver a lecture on hip-hop as an educational institution. This isn't just a speech. It's a manifesto. KRS-One has identified something profound. Hip-hop has become the unofficial education system for Black America. While public schools fail, while crack devastates communities, while Reagan's policies gut social programs, hip-hop artists are stepping up as teachers. And they're teaching real curriculum. Let's break down what hip-hop was actually teaching in 1988. KRS-One's You Must Learn wasn't just a catchy song, it was American history class. He broke down how the word overseer evolved into officer, connecting slavery to modern policing. He taught kids about the Amistad slave revolt, about Marcus Garvey, about the real Christopher Columbus, the genocidal colonizer, not the heroic explorer. Meanwhile, Public Enemy was running what Chuck D called the CNN for black people. Their 1988 album, It Takes a Nation of Millions to Hold Us Back, wasn't entertainment, it was a media studies course wrapped in James Brown samples. When Fight the Power dropped in 1989, created specifically for Spike Lee's Do the Right Thing, it wasn't just protest music. It was critical media literacy, challenging kids to question why Elvis Presley and John Wayne were held up as American heroes when they represented nothing about black experience. And then there was Queen Latifah, running hip-hop's women's studies program. Her 1993 track, UNITY, wasn't just addressing misogyny. It was a comprehensive course on feminism, domestic violence, and respectability politics. But here's what made it revolutionary. Latifah wasn't preaching from an ivory tower. She was a plus-sized woman from Newark using African imagery and royal aesthetics to redefine black femininity. She was teaching body positivity and cultural pride decades before these became mainstream concepts. Then you had De La Soul creating what might be the most radical curriculum of all, Joy. Their DAISY Da Inner Sound, y'all, proved that consciousness didn't have to be angry or militant. Their 1989 album, 3 Feet High and Rising, was like a psychedelic philosophy class, using samples from Johnny Cash to Steely Dan to expand the sonic vocabulary of black music. They taught kids that being conscious could be fun, experimental, weird. They showed that authenticity didn't require aggression.
Eric B. and Rakim were teaching advanced mathematics, not numbers, but the mathematics of language. Rakim's connection to the 5% Nation brought complex spiritual and numerical teachings into hip-hop. When he rapped about being the seventh letter, kids learned about 5%er science and philosophy. But more than that, Rakim revolutionized the technical craft of rap itself. His internal rhymes, his jazz-influenced rhythms, his literate imagery, he proved that hip-hop could be as sophisticated as any art form. By 1989, hip-hop's educational power was so recognized that KRS-One organized the Stop the Violence movement. 13 major artists, from Heavy D to Public Enemy to MC Lyte, came together to create Self-Destruction, a song addressing black-on-black violence. But this wasn't just a song, it was a comprehensive social program. The movement raised over $200,000 for the National Urban League's literacy and anti-crime programs. They published educational materials. They organized community events. Think about that. Hip-hop artists were literally funding literacy programs and violence prevention initiatives. They had turned their art into a social institution. Dash 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 dash. When NWA performed The Police in Detroit and got arrested, something unprecedented happened. Hip-hop became national news. Not for its educational value, not for its community organizing, but for its controversy. MTV, which had largely ignored hip-hop, suddenly couldn't get enough. But they weren't interested in KRS-One's lectures or Public Enemy's political analysis. They wanted the danger, the rebellion, the spectacle. Media executives made a crucial discovery: controversy sold. Suburban white kids, bored with hair metal and pop, were fascinated by hip-hop that felt dangerous and authentic. And authentic increasingly meant criminal. Dash dash dash. Now we return to that courtroom in Manhattan, November 30, 1991. Judge Kevin Duffy is about to rule on a case that seems simple. Biz Markie sampled Gilbert O'Sullivan's Alone Again, naturally, without permission for his track Alone Again. Open and shut copyright violation, right? But Judge Duffy does something unprecedented. Instead of just awarding damages, he issues an injunction. He rules that sampling without clearance is theft, period. No fair use consideration, no cultural context, no recognition of hip-hop as a transformative art form. In that moment, the sonic foundation of conscious rap becomes legally impossible. Dash dash dash. Let me explain why this was devastating. Conscious rap's complexity came from its samples. Public Enemy's Prophets of Rage layered dozens of samples: James Brown, Malcolm X speeches, news clips, jazz records. It was a sonic collage that supported intellectual complexity. KRS-One's You Must Learn built its educational power through carefully chosen samples that reinforced his historical lessons. De La Soul's psychedelic consciousness required eclectic sampling from Hall & Oates, Steely Dan, even French language lessons. Overnight, this became financially impossible. Sample clearances went from costing hundreds of dollars to tens of thousands. Independent labels couldn't afford it. The experimental, layered production that supported conscious messaging simply priced itself out of existence. Dash dash dash. But 400 miles south of KRS-One's Harvard lectures, a different kind of education was happening. In Compton, California, 5 young men were documenting a curriculum that mainstream America didn't want to acknowledge: the crack epidemic, police brutality, and economic abandonment. NWA, niggas with attitudes, weren't trying to be teachers. But their 1988 album, Straight Outta Compton, became required reading for understanding Reagan's America. Here's what people miss about early NWA. The Police was actually conscious rap. It was a sophisticated analysis of systemic police brutality, complete with detailed scenarios and legal terminology. Ice Cube's verses were like sociology lectures about racial profiling and constitutional violations. The difference wasn't the message, it was the delivery and the marketing.
When NWA performed The Police in Detroit and got arrested, something unprecedented happened. Hip-hop became national news. Not for its educational value, not for its community organizing, but for its controversy. MTV, which had largely ignored hip-hop, suddenly couldn't get enough. But they weren't interested in KRS-One's lectures or Public Enemy's political analysis. They wanted the danger, the rebellion, the spectacle. Media executives made a crucial discovery: controversy sold. Suburban white kids, bored with hair metal and pop, were fascinated by hip-hop that felt dangerous and authentic. And authentic increasingly meant criminal. Dash dash dash. Now we return to that courtroom in Manhattan, November 30, 1991. Judge Kevin Duffy is about to rule on a case that seems simple. Biz Markie sampled Gilbert O'Sullivan's Alone Again, naturally, without permission for his track Alone Again. Open and shut copyright violation, right? But Judge Duffy does something unprecedented. Instead of just awarding damages, he issues an injunction. He rules that sampling without clearance is theft, period. No fair use consideration, no cultural context, no recognition of hip-hop as a transformative art form. In that moment, the sonic foundation of conscious rap becomes legally impossible. Dash dash dash. Let me explain why this was devastating. Conscious rap's complexity came from its samples. Public Enemy's Prophets of Rage layered dozens of samples, James Brown, Malcolm X speeches, news clips, jazz records. It was a sonic collage that supported intellectual complexity. KRS-One's You Must Learn built its educational power through carefully chosen samples that reinforced his historical lessons. De La Soul's psychedelic consciousness required eclectic sampling from Hall & Oates, Steely Dan, even French language lessons. Overnight, this became financially impossible. Sample clearances went from costing hundreds of dollars to tens of thousands. Independent labels couldn't afford it. The experimental, layered production that supported conscious messaging simply priced itself out of existence. Enter Dr. Dre, a former NWA member, with a solution. If complex sampling was too expensive, he'd create something new, G-Funk. Fewer samples, more live instrumentation, simpler arrangements. It sounded expensive but cost less to produce. When The Chronic dropped in December 1992, it wasn't just an album, it was a business model. Dre proved that hip-hop could be radio-friendly, MTV-ready, and incredibly profitable without the complex production that defined conscious rap. But here's the cultural trade-off. G-Funk's laid-back, party-friendly sound supported different kinds of lyrics. Less political analysis, more lifestyle celebration. Less education, more entertainment. The music that could afford to be made was music that sold to the broadest possible audience. And the broadest possible audience wasn't interested in 5% nation mathematics or African history lessons. Record executives made another crucial discovery: suburban white teenagers had money. Lots of it, and they were buying hip-hop not for its social commentary, but for its rebellion and its beats. This created a perverse incentive structure. The more dangerous and authentic hip-hop sounded, the better it sold to suburban audiences looking for vicarious thrills. Artists who rapped about street life, violence, and criminality weren't just documenting their reality. They were providing entertainment for middle-class kids who would never experience that reality. Real became code for criminal. Authentic became synonymous with dangerous. And conscious rap, with its emphasis on education and community building, started to feel soft by comparison. Hip-hop had always valued authenticity, keeping it real, representing your community truthfully. But now, keeping it real was being redefined by market forces. Artists faced an impossible choice: talk about positivity, education, and community building and risk being labeled preachy or fake. Or adopt harder, more violent personas to maintain credibility and commercial viability. Even conscious artists felt this pressure. Ice Cube, who had written some of hip-hop's most sophisticated political analysis with NWA, felt compelled to prove his street credibility with increasingly violent imagery in his solo work. Tupac Shakur embodied this contradiction perfectly. He could rap about keeping your head up and honoring your mother on one track, then glorify thug life on the next. He was conscious and gangsta simultaneously, trying to serve two masters.
By 1993, hip-hop was teaching very different lessons. Where KRS-One had taught, "You must learn," now kids were learning from NWA's "Appetite for Destruction," about moving drugs and avoiding police. Where Public Enemy had taught media literacy and political consciousness, now Snoop Dogg's "Gin and Juice" taught lifestyle aspiration and party culture. Where Queen Latifah had taught feminist empowerment, now the most visible female voices in hip-hop were increasingly defined by their relationships to male rappers or their willingness to embrace hypersexualized personas. Then came the media's greatest creation, the East Coast versus West Coast rivalry. What started as competitive regionalism became a manufactured war, with magazines like Vibe and The Source treating rap beefs like boxing matches. The same media that had ignored hip-hop's educational potential suddenly couldn't get enough of its manufactured drama. Tupac versus Biggie became appointment television, must-read journalism, cultural obsession. This wasn't organic beef, this was corporate entertainment. Executives discovered that conflict drove sales, that controversy generated publicity, that violence created legends. September 7, 1996. Tupac Shakur is shot in Las Vegas. 6 months later, March 9, 1997, the Notorious B.I.G. is killed in Los Angeles. In the space of 6 months, hip-hop loses two of its most complex voices, artists who could be conscious and commercial, educational and entertaining. Their deaths aren't just personal tragedies, they're cultural earthquakes. The message was clear. This is what happens when hip-hop gets too real, too dangerous, too authentic.
The same violence that artists rapped about had consumed its biggest stars. In the aftermath of these deaths, hip-hop faced a choice: retreat into safer, more commercial territory, or double down on conscious messaging. The industry chose safety. Puff Daddy's shiny suit era prioritized glamour over consciousness, celebration over education. Master P and Cash Money Records proved that regional scenes could be incredibly profitable without any social commentary at all. Meanwhile, conscious rap was pushed further to the margins. Lauryn Hill's The Miseducation of Lauryn Hill became a rare commercial success for conscious messaging, but it was treated as an exception, not a model. By 2000, hip-hop had produced its first generation of artists who grew up with gangsta rap as the dominant form. Eminem, 50 Cent, Nelly, these artists weren't abandoning conscious messaging, they'd never really experienced it as commercially viable. The educational infrastructure that KRS-One had built, hip-hop as teacher, artist as intellectual, music as curriculum, had been systematically dismantled by market forces. Let's assess what was lost when hip-hop stopped being a teacher and became primarily an entertainer. Educational opportunity. In 1988, kids learned about Malcolm X from Public Enemy. By 1998, how many kids even knew who Malcolm X was? Political consciousness. The generation that came of age during conscious rap's peak, roughly 1985 to 1995, showed higher levels of political engagement and historical awareness than subsequent generations. Community organizing. The Stop the Violence movement had shown hip-hop's power to mobilize communities around positive change. By 2000, that organizational capacity had largely disappeared. Hip-hop had become what conscious artists had fought against: a vehicle for reinforcing the worst stereotypes about Black communities. The music that had once challenged listeners to think critically about police brutality now often glorified criminal behavior. The genre that had promoted African consciousness now often celebrated materialism and status symbols. The culture that had elevated women like Queen Latifah and MC Lyte now increasingly objectified and marginalized female voices. This transformation had global implications. As hip-hop spread internationally, it carried with it the post-conscious messaging of the late 1990s and early 2000s. French hip-hop, Japanese hip-hop, Nigerian hip-hop, these emerging scenes often modeled themselves on gangsta rap's aesthetic rather than conscious rap's educational mission. The world learned about Black American culture through the lens of commercialized authenticity rather than intellectual consciousness.
The rise of streaming platforms and social media created new possibilities for conscious rap. Artists no longer needed major label backing to reach audiences. YouTube, SoundCloud, and Spotify democratized distribution in ways that echoed hip-hop's early independent spirit. Suddenly, conscious rap could compete on a more level playing field. Today's conscious rap artists are rebuilding the educational infrastructure that was lost. Nipsey Hussle before his death was opening schools and promoting financial literacy. Killer Mike has become a prominent voice on economics and social justice. Rhapsody, No Name, and Tierra Whack are carrying forward the feminist consciousness that Queen Latifah pioneered. But the work isn't finished. Hip-hop still struggles with many of the contradictions that emerged during its transformation period. The tension between commercial success and social responsibility remains unresolved. Drill music faces the same moral panic that gangsta rap did. Mumble rap is criticized for lacking lyrical content. The industry still rewards controversy over consciousness. So here we are, more than 30 years after that federal judge made sampling expensive and changed hip-hop's trajectory forever. The question isn't whether gangsta rap was good or bad, that's too simplistic. NWA's artistic achievements were undeniable. Tupac's complexity was profound. The Notorious B.I.G.'s storytelling was genius. The question is, what did we lose when hip-hop stopped being primarily an educational institution and became primarily an entertainment industry? We lost the teacher. We lost the professor who could break down the connection between overseer and officer. We lost the CNN for Black people who provided news and analysis that mainstream media ignored. We lost the feminist voice challenging misogyny and promoting self-respect. But maybe most importantly, we lost the belief that popular culture could serve its community rather than its market. The good news? That belief is making a comeback. From Kendrick Lamar's Grammy performances to the resurgence of political hip-hop in the age of Black Lives Matter, The possibility of hip-hop as teacher rather than just entertainer is being reborn. But it requires a choice, from artists, from audiences, from the industry itself. Do we want hip-hop to educate or just entertain? To challenge or just confirm? To build community or just sell records? The tools are still there. The sample clearance laws that devastated conscious rap in the 1990s are being challenged by fair use advocates. Digital platforms allow independent artists to bypass major label gatekeepers. Social media enables direct artist-to-audience education. The question is, will we use these tools to rebuild hip-hop's educational mission, or will we continue prioritizing profit over pedagogy? November 30, 1991 was the day hip-hop died as an educational institution. But maybe it doesn't have to stay dead. Maybe it's time to bring the teacher back.